Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again for a new Film Fanatic show. Nice to be back. I had some power outages. Well, not a power outage, but my internet was down for about a day and a half, so I wasn't able to put up any videos and or respond to any comments. But I really appreciate all the people. There was a bunch of comments that I just kind of replied to this morning. Really appreciate all the love and finding other people out there that who are just into as into movies as I am, and I really appreciate that. And so, also this week on Thursday, there's going to be we're going to be doing a quantum show at Opera House Video, and that's going to be this Thursday at 6:30, and it's going to be us playing our music. We're going to be, we're trying to this is a new thing for us, but I think this is going to be a little bit more of a kind of a dance party, hopefully, environment. We played a couple of shows over the summer at Opera House Video, and we played more like ambient kind of stuff, and it was great and it was fun and pretty low key. But this one we're trying to make it a little bit more of a featured show, so we'll see how it goes. And also joining us is going to be my friend Leo, who plays in a local band that's really fantastic called Osmia, and they're kind of this noise rock band. He's going to be playing a solo set before us. He's going to play a short little set of some kind of like ambient, dissident beat kind of stuff. So excited about that, and that's going to start at 6:30 at the glorious Opera House Video. I've been promoting the show a lot, and there'll be a bunch more in the next, leading up to Thursday. So if you're around, please come on by. Pretty excited about that. The next movie I'm really excited about seeing in the theater is going to be it's coming. I believe it's opening this Friday, and that's going to be Lee Winnell's The Wolfman, which I'm really excited about. I'm a huge fan of him as a director. I think I might do a little show on his films and kind of the work he's done this week. Just kind of get myself a little excited to see it. I'm pretty excited. He's got a great track record. He's worked on a lot of great films and is a great writer. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited. I believe it opens this Friday. I've been kind of looking forward to this movie for quite a while. And first little rumblings from what I've heard of people who have gotten advanced screenings of this movie is that it's actually really, really good. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. But that's my goal for this weekend is to go see it at some point. So there'll be, of course, if that happens, I'll definitely do a show on that because it's a movie I've been really looking forward to for quite a while. Anyway, so today's show is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about three movies that I just got or that I got over the weekend at Opera House Video. I rented a little group of films, so I'm going to talk about them. So I'm going to talk all about them today in one video, and then, but I also went to Bull Moose yesterday, which was Sunday, and that was great because I had not been up to Bull Moose in quite a few months with some other expenses I've had, and then with Christmas, the holidays, and things, I was kind of a little bit broke. So I got a little bit, I kind of treated myself a little bit yesterday. Got some killer movies. I watched the first one last night. Really, really excited to talk about that this week. But I also have a lot of movies that I want to get to, and so it's a lot of fun. And I want to give a big shout out to all the people who have been really commenting a lot on these videos and supporting this weird little thing that I do because I really love doing this, and it's it's awesome. And we're almost at Film Fanatic here. We're almost at 500 subscribers, so I really appreciate the love and all those great things. So the first movie I'm going to talk about today, and these were all this is the only movie in the stack. There's three movies here that I had not heard about. The rest I had. One movie in particular I'm kind of been wanting to really talk about, and I have been really wanting to see that's going to be included in today's show. This movie, the first one, is this sci-fi movie called Things Will Be Different, and it's a science fiction movie. It came out, I believe, in 2024. It's a new release. It was kind of recommended to me, and so I watched it, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was kind of mysterious. It is kind of about like this time travel with the scenario around these two characters, and where they are kind of being hunted for this kind of manuscript, and that like supposedly unlocks like this kind of scenario of where they will be free or break away from this kind of dark force. But I have to say, I didn't make it all the way through this movie. I think it was it got again. It started off really kind of interesting, and it was really um, kind of mysterious, and it had this. I thought it was cool when it went into this time travel thing, but then I felt like it just kind of. I think midway through the movie, it started to really drag, and then it was kind of showing you the same things over and over again. It just kept playing out the same scenario, and you weren't really getting any answers. And to be honest, I think some of the choices in the story on how they were slowly, giving you information about this whole kind of plot or this time travel scenario for me was like I reached a point where it was totally confusing and it didn't make any sense to me, and it became really redundant. And it seemed like they introduced these elements of what this thing could be about, but then they didn't really give you any other information, and then they just kept repeating that scenario or those scenarios over again. And honestly, I didn't make it all the way through, so I ended up. I have this thing: if I can't get into like if I'm not into a movie, and I'll try to have as much patience as I can because there are movies that are, sometimes it'll be a slow burn and it will be good and you might be on the fence, but then suddenly it's like a light gets turned on and it all makes sense and there's like this reveal and then you're like, oh wow, okay. So I realized that certain films, you gotta have a little bit of patience sometimes for them to kind of slowly give you the information and see where the story goes. But I think to a point because I kind of felt like I started getting really bored and kind of fidgety, and I was like, if a movie reaches a certain point for me that gets to that point, I will usually, which is usually maybe the 45-hour mark. I will usually not finish the movie, and in this case, things will be different. I did not finish it. I took it out. The movie's about an hour and 45 minutes, I believe, and so I made it to about the 45-50 minute mark, and took it out. I couldn't. I didn't have the patience anymore. It started getting redundant and kind of boring, to be honest. Kind of an interesting story in the beginning and interesting premise. I did not know what was going on, but the problem was is that it kept me. I felt like I was still in the dark 40 minutes into it, and I was still like. At one point, I had no idea what was going on. So yeah, I don't really recommend this movie. It's kind of got this TV vibe to it. It doesn't feel like it's a movie, like the production. It seems like it's kind of low budget, but not like in a cool or a good way. And it's okay. It's all right, but I wouldn't recommend. I think especially this past year, 2024, there's been some outstanding films. So there's plenty of other films to see out there. So I would pretty much pass on this. And then this film was called Things Will Be Different. So yeah, kind of disappointing. And I didn't know anything about it. I rented it just on a whim. It was a new release or newer release. So, and I think it came out last year. So, kind of kind of a waste. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone out there. I try to always stay up on new movies and things, and so the next movie I'd heard about, and I was kind of excited to see. And I had a friend that saw it with his son, and they said that this movie was really great. And that is the Weird Al Yankovic story. Of course, everyone knows and loves the iconic pop rock star Weird Al Yankovic. And this film was called Weird, the Al Yankovic story. and it came out. I believe it came out 2024. Or actually, no, wow, it says 2022. Huh, okay. But I think it just came out, at least at to Opera House Video. It was a newer release. It's been there. It was one of those movies I kept seeing in the aisle section, or on the new in the new release section. I kept seeing the film there, but I kind of always like passed on it. But I'm a huge Weird Al Yankovic fan, so how can you not be? Just such a unique, weird musician, and just there's nobody like him. So I thought this would be kind of a cool thing. Generally, I'm not a fan of biopics because I feel like they always get marred down with like an endless barrage of like cliches and things. So it's always hard to get through and to I think make a really good biopic. The only really good biopic that I think I can name that I remember being just so great is a movie that was directed. It was quite a few years ago by Anton Corbijn called Control by Ian, and it's about Ian Curtis, the singer from Joy Division, and that movie is just awesome. But other than that, there's tons of biopics out there, and there's nothing to me that doesn't get marred down by those problems. And again, it's just my opinion. But this movie came out, I guess, evidently 2022. Opera House just got it last year. It was directed by Eric Apple, and the cast is pretty outstanding in this. I mean, you have Daniel Radcliffe, who's awesome, Harry Potter himself, who's playing Weird Al Yankovic. There's Rainn Wilson's in this film also. Rachel Wood is in this film. I mean, it's got a really great cast. Unfortunately, Jack Black is in this movie. I am not a Jack Black fan. I never have been. I just find Jack Black, you know, to be just kind of annoying. I feel like right out of the gate when his film career started, he just like essentially plays the same kind of character that he plays in Tenacious D, and he does all of these films that are just like, just such. I just find him to be such big bloated Hollywood films, and then he does these like kind of so-called romantical comedies, and I've just never been a fan of his stuff because he does the same thing all the time, and I just find him not really funny at all most of the time. But this movie, so I went into this movie thinking, well, I had heard from a friend that they said this was good, so I started watching this the other night, and it's a real interesting movie. The first half of this movie is kind of awesome and it's really unique because the film. It's not at all like a conventional biopic, at least how the film starts. It doesn't have like those kinds of cliche things. It feels like the best way I can describe it is it's like you're inside a Weird Al Yankovic song where it's going to be very sarcastic, very, whimsical, kind of weird, kind of funny, like in a heightened reality. It feels like it's told through the lens of like his creative brain of like how, probably the same process of how he is you know shot to to stardom, like doing these hilarious parodies of pop songs, and it's kind of told through that way, real whimsical and playful and childlike and goofy and silly and a little bit weird and quirky, and it's actually really funny, and particularly around like how they portray his his life growing up and playing the accordion and his like relationship with his dad. And obviously you get a sense that this is all like, kind of or at least my sense was that this was all like there's no way that this is necessarily true. It's like this heightened weird kind of comedic reality, and that's kind of the lens of how the film is being shown. And I liked that they were doing that. But then I have to say, like, when it got further into the film and they started introducing, all of these other kind of characters like Andy Warhol and Wolfman Jack, who's played by Jack Black, which really took me out of the movie. and there's a bunch of other kind of iconic, pop culture stars, musicians, and whatnot that eventually appear in this movie, and it's at a point where he basically, where Yankovic is like on the verge of stardom, and he gets this agent, and but it got kind of ridiculous to me, and I just felt like it didn't make any sense. It took me out of the movie, and again, I'm not a big Jack Black fan at all. And I have to say, when I saw him when he appears on the screen, I was just like, oh God. And it took me out of the movie, and it was just like, and it was kind of the more of it, like it kept doing that same. It had that same kind of approach, you know, of how the movie started. But I felt like suddenly when it got to that, 35, 40 minute mark, it was doing the same kind of. You were seeing the movie the same way, or it was being shown in the same way as how it started. But it felt like all of a sudden the jokes were not funny, and it became really repetitious, and it didn't make any sense as far as why all of these other characters were in it. I checked out after about 40 minutes, almost the same at the same mark as the first movie I just talked about. So I kind of feel like it almost suffered from the same thing as the first film, where it just became repetitious. But then it started off really funny, and again, it had some great moments, especially around Weird Al's family, and the actors that play his family were really great. But then it just felt like it started to wear itself thin, and it wasn't as funny anymore. It just wasn't as funny. I thought the jokes and the comedic element, fell flat. Daniel Radcliffe is great in the movie. He's awesome. He's kind of unrecognizable, in this character. Um, I think he is, one of the better actors around. I think he's like actually really a great actor. So I kind of recommend this movie a little bit more over the first movie I talked about. It's better, but again, I think it still suffers because it ultimately, I think, midway through, it doesn't. The pacing gets weird, and it becomes really repetitious, and it's not as funny. And I also thought too, when it got to that point of where it was like kind of the same old stuff, I was like, you know, um, or kind of the same old, kind of format. I was like craving, maybe getting a sense of what his life was really like growing up, like when he's not, playing this character, and when he was a kid. Like I thought, again, that's a danger because it's going to go into this cliche thing probably because it's a biopic, which we've seen countless times, and why I think so many biopics fail. So they had a different approach with it, which I thought was cool. But that it didn't really work because I thought it wasn't really funny after a while, and it just kind of was flat. But anyway, but then I got curious into thinking like that would have been cool to have seen, get a glimpse of like what his real life would have been or is, because clearly we're not really seeing that. And I thought, all at that point, it would have been cool maybe to get into maybe a little bit more of a serious thing, change the tone, to something of where we get to peek behind the curtain a little bit, but it didn't do that, and so I didn't make it all the way through this movie. I probably stopped watching it at about the 45, 50 minute mark, a little bit longer than the first movie, but I'd say this movie's okay. I don't know if I'd recommend it though. I couldn't get all the way through it though. It was kind of disappointing. It wasn't. Yeah, it was kind of a clunker. So yeah, that's unfortunate how I feel about it. But take it for what it's worth. He's a great character and a iconic musician in our world. So yeah, the final movie I'm going to talk about today is a movie I was actually looking forward to quite a bit. I almost saw it in the theater because I had heard really good things about it, and that is Immaculate. That came out this year or last year, 2024. It's definitely a horror movie, or it's been kind of labeled. I've heard a couple people call it a nun exploitation movie, which I kind of agree with, but then I kind of don't at all. It was directed by Michael Mohan, and it's um, it's a weird thing. This movie, like it has. Ultimately, I was really bummed out by this movie, and I did not make it through. It's about this woman who becomes a nun, and she travels to Italy, and she goes to Rome, and she swears her life, her allegiance to the church, to live this life of celibacy and become a nun. And all of these things mysteriously happen, and you get the sense that this is a like this murderous cult, and that she's actually signing her life away, to join. And the weirdest thing about this movie, and I did see this movie in the theater, the Omen, the beginning, which is the Omen remake, or not the Omen remake, the Omen prequel that came out last year. I did see that in the theater, and that movie was really really good up until the end. I was uh, really disappointed with how that film ended, because it felt really forced. It got really super cliche, and they were just trying to milk this thing to where they were gonna like, well, we're gonna just keep making these movies, and it just didn't make any sense, and it was pointless. All up until that point, there were some really great moments, but the thing that's so weird is that Immaculate, and I've heard people talk about this a lot, but Immaculate and The Omen, the beginning, they're literally the same fucking movie. Like, I don't get what that's about. Like, I guess they both came out. Um, I guess they both came out within the same week or 2 weeks of each other as far as their release when they came out this past summer. I think it was the summertime when they came out. Maybe it was in the fall. But anyway, it was this year, last year, 2024. And it's so bizarre on how both of these movies are identical in every way. Like, literally. They're the same fucking movie, and I'm like, what the hell is that about? I had heard people who were critical of the Omen, the beginning, said that they thought Immaculate just a better movie and was a superior movie for the most part. But I have to say, like, I think the thing that I did not like about Immaculate, like, it starts off really well. There's a great opening sequence in this movie, and it's like, oh wow, this is gonna be pretty creepy, pretty scary, and pretty gruesome, and it's I was into it. After the first opening, about 10 15 minutes into this movie, I was like, yep, this is I'm on board. This is pretty awesome. But then I felt what happened was there was a series of these like really generic jump scares in this movie that I just thought were so like, I don't know, the only way I can describe it is that they were just cheesy, and they were really predictable, and it just felt like these really generic, safe kind of jump scares were just thrown in this movie to like move the story along, and to like, quote unquote scare people, and to like, you know uh, up the ante a little bit more in the story. And because I felt like, aside from that, it didn't really. The story was good. Again, it's identical to the Omen, which I have no idea what that's about. Like, it's so weird. Um, it's got the same beats, everything, the same tone. It's even takes place in Rome. Both movies do. It's got the same. It's got the same vibes all across the boards, but all across the board, and it. I felt like they were throwing in these like really generic jump scares that you could see coming, and I felt like these jump scares were forced, and it felt like they were doing this because the story itself was not thrilling enough. wasn't as well executed. They didn't. I felt like they threw these tropes in the movie to just kind of push along the story because the story couldn't do it on its own merit, because I felt like the story was not really, driving you in that place. It wasn't really, it had a thriller element. This movie is a horror film, but it has like a thriller kind of mystery element, and I felt like it was established in the beginning pretty well, and it goes for a bit of time in that direction where you're like, okay, this is cool, like I'm digging it, but it wasn't enough to where it could carry the entire story and throughout the entire length of the film. So it felt like the director and the filmmakers, people involved in this film, threw in these jump scares to try to like move it along. It felt really forced, and it was so instead of letting the story do those things like itself, it just felt so tacked on, and I did not dig the jump scares, and they were really cheesy, they were really predictable, So, and I have to say, like as far as originality and like just from a directing standpoint and the suspense element, I have to say, because both of these movies are exactly the same, which is again so bizarre to me. But I have to say that as far as really a really talented director or a really a stronger version or a much more of a suspenseful venture, I will say that in terms of that, I think the Omen remake, the Omen, the beginning, that film is way better, way more suspenseful, way more creepier. It has a lot more of an original approach to the story. It doesn't have the same kind of generic jump scares, although it does do that towards the third and fourth act of that film, and the ending is just an atrocity, which is why I didn't like that movie. But the first half, the second half of that movie is really good. It's so well directed. It's really it's got this really intense level of suspense. It's not really predictable, and there are moments where it's kind of legitimately scary and creepy. And I think that movie was a better version of the out of the two, and compared to Immaculate, I don't think this film was nowhere near as strong in comparison to that movie. But again, I got with Immaculate, I got again 15 minutes into it, and after the fifth or sixth just tacked on jump scare, I was like, I'm out of this. I'm done, and I took it out and I couldn't watch it. So I was just like, this is just silly. Like, really, do they really need to keep doing this? And it was like the same old kind of shit over and over again, and it felt like it was just being used to kind of like to kind of push the story along, as opposed to like, well, first the story's got to be good. It's got to be thrilling. It's got to pull you in. Whether it's a fast-paced moving film or a slow burn, and this was neither. And I just felt like it, because of that, it just wasn't scary. It just wasn't thrilling anymore. There was no suspense because it was just like, oh my god, really. So ultimately, all three movies that I got, I was really disappointed with. I didn't make it through either of any of these movies. So yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't really recommend it. I mean, out of all of these movies, I mean, maybe Immaculate, that could be your cup of tea, but I don't know. And the same thing with Weird Al. Like, it's got some things about it that are great, but ultimately it failed, and they both for me. And the other film, I would just not. I would just totally pass on. So yeah, pretty rough going here with these newer films. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.